You know, your time there, it was what, 70 to 78?
I was there from 71 to 78.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what was it like to be you know, the defensive coordinator under him? I mean, he's a...
Well, I'll tell you, Woody was a great teacher and a great coach and
Right.
a great person. And he had a great compassion for his players, loved his players, loved his team, loved Ohio State, loved the things that we went there. And he was a great patriot. You know, he served in World War II and was a great patriot. He loved this country. And, you know, the media put out a lot of the bad things that went with it, but there were so many great things about the man that people don't even know about. I know when I speak sometimes I talk about the Woody Hayes that nobody else knows about. And Woody was such a great person with not only with his players, with the people around him, with his coaches, and with you know, he would spend, when he'd get down in the dumps on something, wasn't feeling good, he'd go to the hospital and spend 2 or 3 hours over there visiting people at the hospital to make them feel better.
Right.
And it always made him feel better.
Right.
And I remember we played Michigan in '75, finished our season undefeated. We were ranked #1 in the country, and we beat Michigan 21-14 at Ann Arbor. And when we came back from the game, he said to me, "I want you on my TV show tonight." And I said, "Okay, I'll be there." And you know what he did? He got 21 long-stemmed red roses from somebody when he got off the plane. And we got back to the TV show that night, and he said, "You know what I did with those roses?" He says, "Ann and I couldn't use. What are we going to do with those 21 roses?" He says, "I went to the hospital," and he says, "I gave it to a patient that hadn't had visitors all that day."
Yeah.
And he says, "So that's where I spent my thing." Here he had one of the great victories in his time, and he spent the next 2 or 3 hours at the hospital with people
Yeah.
that he didn't even know.
Yeah. It's uncommon.
Yeah, well, he was uncommon. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. He was not a common man.
Right. What was your reaction to some of the recent news that's come out of Ohio State? You know, with Terrell Pryor and Coach Tressel and that stuff.
I'm really disappointed. Coach Tressel, in my opinion, is a wonderful man, a wonderful human being, a great Christian man that loves the Lord and loves what he does. And it's just difficult for me to see that he's gotten into this difficulty. But you know what? He's got a lot of years ahead of him. It's just like all of us, when we get fired sometimes you just, oh, gee, where am I going to go from here? But you know what? God has some plans for him, and he's going to be fine.
Yeah.
The thing that disappoints me probably as much, Bert, as anything is I don't understand players selling their memorabilia like that. I mean, I know when I got my first Rose Bowl watch, I thought, my God, this is the greatest thing. And I remember kids gave their first Rose Bowl watch to their dad.
Right.
You know, it was something very, very special. And it was difficult for me to understand that.
Yeah.
You know, I still have a lot of memorabilia that I've accumulated over the years. I've given a lot of away. I gave, my father passed away before I could give him anything, but you know, I gave my brothers something, and I gave my sister something, and you know, it's just hard for me to understand why they would do that, you know. And I'll tell you, frankly, for a tattoo, come on. I mean, you know, that's hard.
Yeah.
But you know, they're going to pay a price for it.
Right.
And the university, unfortunately, there's a lot of really fine young men on that football team that are going to suffer for what a few did.
Right.
And it's too bad.
Yeah, and I think kind of like Coach Hayes, Coach Tressel's had sort of an ignominious end that, you know, kind of stained a good run. It's sort of unfortunate.
We had a great run, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a great coach.
Yeah.
He's a great person.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? He's going to bounce back.
Yeah.
He'll find I don't know what he'll be doing, but God has something good for him. You know, when I got fired at Ohio State, you know, when Woody got fired, I got fired, and I said, where am I going to go from here? I'm at the pinnacle of college coaching. You know, while I was there, we won 6 consecutive Big Ten championships. And I said, you know, where do you go from here? Well, Coach Vermeil called me, and I ended up going to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
The furthest thing in my thoughts ever was I'd coach in the National Football League. I
Right.
never thought of that. I was a college coach. But you know what? It went that way, and it ended up with a great career in the NFL. So.
Right. Kind of like locally, we've had the situation with North Carolina. Coach Butch Davis has kind of pleaded ignorance, with all the things that have gone on there. How much responsibility do you think a head coach has for running that side of the program? Being on top of things like that. It seems like there's more of that now than there used to be.
Well, it's hard for me. I don't know any of the inner workings of that. Just what I've read in the paper, which sometimes I believe about half of that. But ultimately, the head coach is responsible for what goes on.
Right.
As our programs seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of the number of people surrounding, when I was a college coach, we just had one person that was we called him the brain coach.
Yeah, academic guy.
But I tutored. All of our coaches tutored players.
Right.
We all were involved with tutoring kids and getting them through the things, and so we were directly responsible to the head coach, to Coach Hayes or to Coach Harp, whoever, and we ended up doing those things even though we traveled and so forth. It was our responsibility to do those things, but I think the more we've gotten away from the coaching staffs being involved in these, we've let other people get involved. Those were the things where you start to lose control because you really don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And evidently there was a coach at North Carolina that was involved with
an agent, yeah,
with some of these things, and that's unfortunate. See, I don't believe I ever worked with a coach that would have done that.
Right.
So, it's hard.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, too, that I think that kind of speaks to sort of a trend where at some of these big schools, football is almost like, the football program is almost like a separate entity from the school. They're not as entwined as it used to be, say, when, like, Coach Hayes would walk to class, and talk to students and stuff like that. I don't think you see that as much anymore.
Coach Hayes, well, you're right. Yeah, that's a good analogy because I think we were much closer to the student body, much closer to the overall university, and we were involved with a lot of the things that went on in the university, and not just as a part of our enhancing our program, but we were part of the university. We loved what we did.
Right.
And I'll tell you a great Woody Hayes story, and it tells you maybe more about Woody Hayes than anything I could tell you about. But Coach Hayes, if we were back in the office, he'd say, "Come on, let's go to the faculty club and have lunch."
Yeah.
And he knew all the people in the faculty club. All were very good friends of his. And I won't say they were close friends, but they all knew him, and of course everybody knew him. But we went there one spring, and he said, "Come on, George, let's go over to the faculty club and have lunch." We did. And there was a little co-ed there that waited on him, and she said, "Coach," she said, "this will be the last time I'll be able to wait on you this year." She says, "I'm going to have to drop out of school." And she said, "What do you mean you're going to have to drop out of school?" She said, "Well, I don't have enough money to pay my tuition and fees, and I'm going to have to drop out for a quarter or two and make enough money to come back." He said, "Well, how many quarters do you have?" She says, "Well, I just got one quarter to go." And she says, "Well, you're not going to drop out of school. You should come over to my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and I want to talk to you about this."
Yeah.
Oh, she says, "Oh, Coach, I can't." She says, "Well, you be there at 9 o'clock." So she was there at 9 o'clock, and my office was right around the corner from Coach's, and I saw her come out, and the tears were just pouring down her cheeks, and she said, "Thank you, Coach, thank you, Coach," and she was just crying, and she walked out. And I said, "Everything okay?" And she says, "Oh, yeah." He said, "George, in 1954, I won the national championship. We won the national championship." And he says, "The doggone alumni got together and they bought me a Cadillac." And he says, "I'm not a Cadillac guy."
Yeah.
He says, "I'm a Ford guy." You know what I mean? He said, so I told the people I don't want this car. And he said, well, people of all over the state have donated for this. And he said, well, I don't want it. He says, you sell it, and he says, I'll take that money and I'll put it in the bank. And the same thing happened in '57. They won the national championship in '57, and they bought him another car, and he took that money, put it in the bank, or put it in some kind of an account. And he says, not one penny of that money will ever be spent on anybody in the Hayes family.
Right.
He said, but listen, that money has put 73 kids, has paid the tuition and fees for 73 kids here at Ohio State, coaches' kids and other kids that needed help.
Right.
And I said, Coach, I said, and that little girl says, well, Coach, I'll never be able to pay you back. He says, someday you'll be able to pay forward.
Yeah.
When somebody else needs help, you'll remember that somebody helped you and you helped them.
Right.
But that was Coach Hayes, you know, that was the real man. That was this legend that we all know about his football, but he was more than that. He was a great human being.
So that's why it's sort of upsetting. Maybe was that how it ended, kind of upsetting for you? I mean, that Clemson game.
Yeah, because it was a kind of a bad deal right from the beginning. But anyways, that's you know, the untold story of that whole thing was that when the game was over, he asked me. He said, I don't want to see the press because I know they're going to ask me. He said, would you do the press conference? I said, sure. So I went ahead and did the press conference. And then I went back to the hotel with Coach Hayes. And I was there probably till 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Went home and got a shower and got back. And I came back and I was back to his room at 6 o'clock. And he said, George, I got to tell you this. He says, the one person that I told I would be the first one to know was Paul Harning, was the sports editor of the Columbus Dispatch for years and years and years. And he said, I told him he'd be the first one to know when I was going to leave Ohio State. And he says, I called him this morning and told him I was going to resign.
Yeah.
And so when the athletic director came up to the room and he told him, he said, I just called Paul Harning and told him I was going to resign from Ohio State. And the athletic director said, well, we'll see about that. And
take a truck.
Oh, okay. So when we got back to Columbus, the headlines of the Columbus Dispatch, which is an afternoon paper, was Woody Hayes resigns at Ohio State.
All right.
But while we were in the air between Jacksonville and Columbus, the athletic director and the president got together and fired him.
All right.
So they wouldn't even let him resign after 28 years.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really, how do I want to put it very nicely? That was horse crap.
Yeah.
and I really felt bad about it. And I knew when that happened, there went my opportunity of ever being the head coach at Ohio State.
Right.
And I didn't know whether the new coach, whoever came in, but I got fired, and as I told you, I ended up with Dick Vermeil with the NFL, so it worked out.
So it worked out. I mean, that kind of leads me to and this is the last question I got for you. I think coaches are in a unique position to offer advice to the general public with how to deal with adversity and getting fired and things like that. I mean, it seems like you really got no option but to bounce back, you know?
Well,
whether you're a coach or just a regular person, you know?
You know, I've helped, I don't know how many, I've helped quite a few people that have gone through the adversity of being fired.
Yeah.
And I know when I got fired the first time, it was devastating.
Yeah.
You know, you'd had a career that was going high and everything was going good. And all of a sudden, you don't have a job.
Yeah.
January, the paycheck stopped. And, I went from November to February before I got the job at Ohio State. And the only thing I is that, you got to trust in God. You got to sit down and pray and say, Father, I need your help and guidance, and help me to get through this. And God's always there for us if we just ask Him. And I just feel that got us through this thing, and when it all ended up, when I got that telephone call from Coach Hayes, I mean, it was out of the blue. You know, I didn't have a job, and I got a chance to. I grew up in the state of Ohio, and now I got a chance to coach at Ohio State University with Woody Hayes. Wow.
Yeah.
You know, what a whew. And so it just seems like if you just trust in the Lord's going to take care of you if you really believe that and take care of it.
Yeah.
And I do, and I hope everybody does, because He's still in charge.
Yeah.
God is still in charge no matter what.
Yeah, and I think as you're sitting here on this porch at the beach, I think your life speaks to it.
Well, I don't know. I've been blessed so much, and I'm grateful for the many blessings that we've had.
Sure. All right. Well, thanks, Coach. I appreciate it. What, 7?